Tensions remain high along the Lebanon-Israel border as the implementation of the US-backed security arrangements enters a new phase. The Lebanese army has begun deploying in the first so-called pilot zone following an Israeli withdrawal, marking what officials describe as the start of a broader effort to restore state authority in southern Lebanon. However, the deployment has already faced challenges, with the Lebanese army accusing Israeli forces of hindering its movements and opening fire near soldiers during the operations in the south. The developments raised fresh questions about the durability of the ceasefire mechanisms and whether the pilot zones can pave the way for wider stabilization. Meanwhile, violence in the occupied West Bank continues to escalate amid a rise in attacks by Israeli settlers. The latest incidents have drawn renewed international concerns as Egypt welcomed the Netherlands' decision to ban products originating from Israel settlements and urged other European Union member states to adopt similar legal measures. The move comes as international organizations continue to warn of worsening security conditions and increasing attacks against Palestinian communities. I'm Ram Morsi. Let's get in focus. According to the New York Times, the Lebanese army has begun deploying in the southern village of Zawtar al-Gharbiya following an Israeli withdrawal, marking the first implementation of a U.S.-brokered plan to transfer control of occupied areas back to the Lebanese state. The deployment comes ahead of the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun's meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, where border security and Israel's withdrawal from southern Lebanon were expected to feature prominently. Under the phased agreement, the Lebanese army will gradually assume control of designated pilot zones as Israeli forces withdraw, with the aim of facilitating the return of displaced residents and reinforcing the ceasefire. However, the arrangement remains controversial as Israel's withdrawal is linked to Lebanon's efforts to disarm Hezbollah, which has rejected both the negotiations and the framework. Also, tensions have risen as the Lebanese army accused Israeli occupation forces of firing as its forces deploy in the pilot zone. For further analysis, we're joined from Beirut by Munir Shahida, former Lebanese government coordinator with UNIFIL. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening. Firstly, let's start off here by asking you about the Lebanese army. They have entered the first pilot zones following Israel's withdrawal. How significant is the first deployment politically as well as militarily here?
Watching, in reality, the first pilot zone had a conflict going on between the Lebanese army because they did not want to get into a pilot zone that was not actually occupied in the first place, but there were pressures on Lebanon and the Lebanese army to go ahead with this. So yesterday, the Lebanese army got into the first pilot zone that was not even occupied by Israel in the first place, and despite that, Israel shot the Lebanese army, claiming that the Lebanese army went farther than the pilot zone. So we now see the kind of relationship between Israel and the Lebanese army, how it is illegal. They could have called the U.S. committee and say that the Lebanese army has went across the designated line, but they did that instead to show that they have the last words in everything, and everything is in their hands. And the question is, why did Israel choose a pilot zone that was not occupied, and why there are other 6 pilot zones that are not occupied? Why does Israel insist that the first phase would have unoccupied pilot zones? It is so that the Lebanese army would be in conflict with the resistance in the very first few hours of the implementation of the phase. So when we say a pilot zone that is not occupied by Israel, this means that Hezbollah is in there. So Israel wanted the Lebanese army to confront the resistance in the very first few phases of implementing the plan. So yesterday was the first phase, and despite the fact that resistance does not want to disarm in any area before the withdrawal of Israel, but let's see what happens in the end. And despite that, Israel continued its bombardment, its destruction, to the point that there was a visit by the Prime Minister in Zautar West, and there were choppers on top of him roaming around. So Israel doesn't really respect any kind of law or agreement.
Okay, well, so you mentioned a number of very interesting points there. Mainly, one of them is that you were saying that the Israelis had shot at the Lebanese army in a way to prove that they have the last word when it comes to what happens and what doesn't happen in occupied southern Lebanon. And you also said that they chose zones related to Hezbollah there, and that they are not occupied by the Israeli army, but rather have Hezbollah elements there, and thus hoping to provoke some sort of confrontation between the Lebanese army and Hezbollah. Do you think that this is a tactic by the Israelis here, a poison pill, if you will, to somehow hinder the negotiations, or maybe even possibly completely destroy the negotiation process between the two countries?
If we go back in time, before the framework agreement was signed, there was already a contention between the representatives of the Lebanese army and the representatives of the Israeli army, and the Israelis wanted that Ali Tahir Heights would be the first pilot zone. This is the area that Israel tried to occupy 6 times and failed, and they insisted that Ali Tahir Heights would be the first pilot zone, and Lebanon did not agree on this at all. So I believe that they want to put Lebanon in front of Hezbollah in order to create this kind of conflict. And this is what a lot of Israeli officials said, actually. They said that they want to create this conflict that they have been seeking for years. So I believe that it's a present, a gift to give to Israel, to have some kind of internal conflict within Lebanon, so that the resistance would be preoccupied in the internal conflict between the Lebanese army and the resistance. This is the main goal of Israel. But set this aside, let's assume that the Lebanese army already deployed in those pilot zones, the first phase, second phase, third phase, etc. And by the way, all of them are north of Litani. All of these pilot zones are north of the Litani. When we are going to reach somewhere like the yellow zone designated by Israel, and according to the agreement signed between Lebanon and Israel, the framework agreement, there's a condition for Israeli withdrawal that the political leadership in Lebanon must completely disarm the entirety of Lebanon, not just in the south, not just the militias in the south. So they want to enforce this condition of disarming all paramilitary arms across the Lebanese territory before withdrawal. So Israel knows that this is a very sensitive issue and it needs years to implement. And I can give you an example if I can't be too long. We had an agreement in November 2024, and there were 15 months where in the south of Litani, the Lebanese army was disarming all paramilitary forces, and the Lebanese army needed more than 15 months in order to truly disarm the south of Litani. And when the war came back, it was clear that there were still a lot of resistance arms in the area. So if we needed more than 15 months in the south of Litani, how long do you think the Lebanese army needs to disarm all the arms of resistance across Lebanon from north to south and east to west? It means years and years. And this is what Israel is counting on. It knows that this is a critical issue and it needs a long time to implement. So if we talk also about Palestinian camps, these as well need a lot of years. Does this mean that Israel is going to stay for 10 or 15 years in Lebanon until the Lebanese government is able to disarm all paramilitary forces in Lebanon? Israel knows this, and this is their plan.
Oh, yes, that's also a strategy that the Israelis have used in the past, as you said. It's a way of stalling and maintaining, occupation of lands in the name of, trying to disarm factions or whatever it is. But now the Israeli forces, as you've said, continue to maintain positions in large parts of southern Lebanon despite the deployment process by the Lebanese army there. Given the current situation, how does this affect Lebanon's ability to fully restore state authority? And do you think that this puts them in a position where, as you've mentioned earlier, they may possibly find some sort of clash between them and other factions within the south of Lebanon because of the current situation where the Israelis continue to occupy Lebanese lands?
I have spoken earlier about what if the Lebanese resistance agreed to disarm, but what if they did not? This would mean that that Israel would stay occupying these lands forever. This makes no sense. But the conditions that we signed upon had a condition that for the Lebanese army to disarm all arms across the Lebanese territory, not just Hezbollah, but also the Palestinian camps, as well as arms in the Lebanese people's hands. And then the Israelis are going to take some kind of pretense and say, we have this one building over there that has arms and this area that has some other arms. They're going to try to circumvent this agreement. So this is why I believe that the president's visits in Washington and his meeting with President Trump is to pressure Israel to withdraw from the south. But will Trump actually pressure Israel to do so? So now this is the time to talk about the pilot zones that were always spoken about by Israel, as well as buffer zones. They have been speaking about buffer zones in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Egypt, etc. They always use these words since 1948 under the pretense that they want to protect the Lebanese, the Israeli borders, but the actual goal is this idea of greater Israel, that as time goes on and people forget, these buffer zones would become inseparable parts of the entity, just like it happened with the Golan Heights. Since 1974, we were speaking about a buffer zone in the Golan Heights, and it's already now annexed. This is what they try to do on the long term. They use this as a pretense, as an excuse. We want to create buffer zones to protect the borders on northern Israel, but they are betting on the time factor, on the memory factor, so that these buffer zones become inseparable parts of their territories.
Okay, well, you also mentioned there the President Aaron's visit to Washington as well with Trump, and this is the hope that basically President Trump will somehow pressure the Israelis into, continuing to follow through with the arrangements of these pilot zones and eventually giving up occupying the south of Lebanon. But given the soon-to-be meeting between Netanyahu and Trump soon, do you believe that he will be able to pressure Netanyahu, or will it be the other way around, given what's happening as well regionally? It's not just about Lebanon, given the Middle East situation at the moment.
Let me be frank with you. Let me be honest. I believe that we are going back to war between Iran and Israel, and between Iran and the US, and Israel is trying to get ready to get involved. And once the war is back, all of these agreements will be nullified. Israel is seeking, and it is the one that is actually telling the US to go back to war with Iran. And when the agreement a month ago between Iran and the US was signed, the biggest loser in this agreement was Israel, or Netanyahu to be specific. And going back to this war, the only winner, not the biggest winner, the only winner is Netanyahu. No one in this world has any kind of interest in returning to war between the US and Iran. Even US and Iran, Gulf states, they don't have any kind of interest. The entire world doesn't have any interest in returning to war except Israel. Israel pushed the US to go back to war with Iran and not to implement any kind of point in these agreements. And we see escalation. There are 75 fuel planes that are in Ben Gurion airport right now, to the point that the minister of transport said that the airport there is no longer useful because there are so many different crowds over there. They are using F-35 planes from Germany and from South Korea, Italy, etc. It is very clear that there is mobilization for another round of violence against Iran. And when that happens, Israel is going to get involved. And then the Lebanese territory is going to be, or the Lebanese situation is going to be secondary. There wouldn't be any longer any framework agreement. We will see what is going to happen in the war between U.S., Israel, and Iran, and accordingly, we can tell what is going to happen in Lebanon.
Okay, well, let's hope that that doesn't happen and it doesn't break down into complete open war. But if that doesn't happen and things in the Middle East in general settle down, what role will coordination between the Lebanese army as well as ceasefire monitoring committees play in preventing further violations? And will institutions or like UNIFIL be involved in maintaining order and peace?
If war comes back, Israel is going to flee all kinds of agreements signed, because currently Israel is not really attacking Beirut or any parts in the depth of Lebanon because there are pressures from the U.S. against Israel. But in case war returns against Iran, Israel is going to flee from these commitments, and they're going to bombard Beirut and the entirety of Lebanon, and we are going to see Houthis and Hezbollah getting involved. But if we actually reach a ceasefire between Iran and the U.S., this is going to affect Lebanon, of course, because Iran's condition was to stop war in all fronts, including Lebanon, and the withdrawal of Israel from the south of Lebanon, and then the Lebanese army is going to be able to disarm. But this is in case we actually do reach an agreement. But I believe that there is pressure from the Zionist lobby against the U.S. In order to go back to the war. People are speaking about nuclear arms, etc., but I don't believe that this was the actual goal of the war. I believe the goal was the overthrowing of the regime, ending the missile capabilities of Iran. And since these objectives were not reached, this is why they come back asking for war and warmongering as well. So I believe that the upcoming round is going to be even more violent than the 40-day war. I hope that this doesn't happen. I hope we don't reach this point. I hope we reach an agreement, because the world can no longer bear the closure of the Hormuz Strait. No more crises because of oil. Imagine also if Iran used Bab el-Mandeb as leverage. A barrel of oil can reach $300. This is going to be a crisis for the entire world, not just for the region. I hope that Iran and the U.S. would reach an agreement. I believe that Israel is trying to push the U.S. to go to war, but the U.S. is trying to get Iran to the negotiation tables once again to write a new agreement, because the past agreement was in the interest of Iran, not the U.S.
Thank you so much for your thoughts there. That was Munir Shahid, a former Lebanese government coordinator with UNIFIL. Thank you for your insights and thank you for your ideas there. Meanwhile, violence continues to escalate across the occupied West Bank amid a rise in attacks by Israeli settlers. Now, according to the Israeli Times, the Netherlands will ban the import, purchase and sale of goods originating from Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank starting September 22nd. The Dutch government said the measure is intended to uphold its obligations under international law and ensure it does not contribute to what it describes as an unlawful situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. With the decision, the Netherlands joins Ireland, Belgium and Spain in restricting trade with Israeli settlements, while all four countries also recognize the State of Palestine. The move comes amid growing calls for the European Union to adopt bloc-wide restrictions in response to Israel's war on Gaza and rising violence in the occupied West Bank. Although several EU member states remain opposed to such measures, A report by the Global Echo organization found that the Netherlands accounts for roughly 1/3 of agricultural exports from Israeli settlements and nearly half of those exported to the European Union. To talk to us more about this, we're joined from Paris by Majid Boudin, an international law professor. Thank you for joining us this evening, sir.
Thank you.
Let's start off by the recent reports pointing to a surge again in settler attacks across the occupied West Bank. What factors are driving the escalations, and how does international law address these incidents?
I mean, these incidents are part of a continuous move planned, organized by the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu to realize a creeping expropriation of the West Bank, of Eastern Jerusalem, and also Gaza. What is going on here? Here, you will see that these occupation is expanding, and they are creating zones: Zone A, Zone B, Zone C. They are so the occupied territories are not under the same occupation regime. There are several regimes, and from time to time, they will declare legal the occupation. Mm-hmm. But here we have to make sure that to understand it clearly, when Israel is making the occupation legal under Israeli law, it remains illegal under international law. And this is more important because no state can, under international law, use its own laws to evade from its international obligations. So now Israel has the international obligation to protect the territories that they are occupying, all the Palestinian territory, East Jerusalem, West Bank, and Gaza. And the duty of an occupying force and an occupying authority is to maintain the situation in their status quo as they are. And they are not allowed to go and take it bite by bite and to make these settlements. The settlements are illegal, and negotiating on how much the settlers are occupying, how many time, how many square meters, how many acres, etc., is completely wrong, because the whole system of settlement is illegal. And what Netanyahu is doing is trying to pull the international community to discuss on the technicality of the occupation, while the problem is principally and mainly, exclusively a matter of law. Now, in these negotiations, the most important thing is to set up the framework of the negotiations. Whether it is for the Palestinian territories, whether it is for Lebanon, whether it is for this Iranian war. When we see the Iranian protocol of the ceasefire protocol of agreement, we can notice when you read it carefully that there is no reference to any legal framework. This is why it did not work. And this is why it will be complicated to restart the process again. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the process is based on the use of force. The use of force is changing every day, and the use of force will not lead to a settlement. This is why the European Union and other countries in the world, they are calling, particularly the United States, to inflex their policy here and to declare it that negotiations will be made. Yes. And everybody is willing to have this negotiation succeed, but in a framework of international law.
Well, sir, again, the United Nations as well had expressed concerns over the increased violence against the Palestinian community, specifically in the West Bank, and obviously in Gaza as well. Given the current situation in the West Bank, how serious do you think the situation is on the ground? Because we know from the October 7th attacks that the lead up towards this was the increased settler violence in the West Bank. Are we seeing a repeat of what happened then?
Yes, the problem is that the situation in the West Bank is worsening because the settlers are not stopping. They are continuing, and from time to time they will take another bite, and they will destroy more houses. They will destroy land. They will destroy olive trees, and they will destroy the economic structure of the West Bank. So they wanted to empty the West Bank from its population, and little by little, they will not succeed to do it. But this is their plan. They are pushing them to some ghettos, and they want to also to take over the infrastructure.
So do you think, sir, I apologize for cutting you off there, but you know what you just said there, do you think that basically what the Israelis or the settlers are trying to do at the moment is destroy any hope of creating a Palestinian state and thus ending any hope of some sort of negotiations under international law? It's going to be de facto, Israel.
Yes. The question is not that the settlers are doing that. The settlers under international law, they are controlled by the Israeli
government, yes.
The Israeli government and the Israeli state. So these acts under international law are attributable to the state of Israel. So the state of Israel is responsible, and this is why we have seen the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, who said it in a very clear way that what Israel is doing through the settlers, through the militia, through the army, through any structure or any instrument, are acts of Israel, and they are illegal and under international law, and Israel must withdraw from that. So when we come to negotiations, we have to understand that, and this is the mistake that is made. It's not a coincidence that Donald Trump doesn't want to refer to international law, but because this is a policy. It's not also a coincidence that Netanyahu is rejecting international law. Mm-hmm. So it is to weaken the other side, because the other side, if they hand down or hand over or international law, what they have in their hands. The weapons are the weapons of the United States. They are supporting Israel, and this is very clear. Situation is changing in the relations between the US and Israel. But for the time being, the only weapon that the Palestinians have in a practical term is international law. So they don't have to abandon it. It's the same in the negotiations between the US and Iran. But when you see, for instance, President Trump saying that, well, for the Strait of Hormuz, he will impose duties. And this is not in compliance with international law. At the same time, what is he doing here? Mm-hmm. He is giving weapons to Iran, the Iranian regime, because then they will say, okay, now who will impose the duties? While in fact, the duties, whether they're imposed by X or Y or Z, are illegal, because the navigation in the Strait of Hormuz or Bab el-Mandeb must be free of anything, free of taxes, but free also of any blockage or anything. So the fact that the international community cannot until today impose a legal framework is the weak point of any negotiations. Yes. Why? Everybody wants the negotiations to succeed, but to have the negotiations succeed, they have to draw the legal framework. And the legal framework is simply international law, who is saying sovereignty of each country and their boundaries. And going from there,
Yes.
We have the principles of international law, and the matter can be discussed in the framework of international law.
Well, as you said, international law here is key to finding a solution specifically for the Palestinian territories, and the way to find a solution is by the international community to apply the international law, which Egypt has welcomed when it comes to the Netherlands' decision to ban trade in goods originating from Israeli settlements, and has called on other European Union member states to adopt the similar legal measures because of international law here. How significant is this growing international pressure, and could it encourage other countries as well to take more serious actions against these illegal settlements, especially now with the increase in illegal settlements and land sale or land theft of Palestinians?
Well, this decision by the Netherlands, the government of the Netherlands, and by other countries like Spain and other countries, are very important measures to ban the importation of goods produced in the West Bank and the Palestinian territories. Why it is important? Because the revenues of these products are going to the treasury of Israel, and delivering them to the Palestinian people or the Palestinian Authority. But here the point is, why these measures are important, but they are still symbolic today. And the EU must go further and must take more important measures, because when they are symbolic, they are fine, but they are necessary, but they are not sufficient. So they have the European Union must take measures which are more effective, because measures they must have an effect. And the effect in the international law, it's also how these measures are taken and what the effect is on the Israeli economy. But on the Israeli economy, the effect is very small. It is not nothing, but it's very small. And this move must be increased.
Okay, well, could additional European, as you said, additional European restrictions when it comes to settlement products increase the pressure regarding settlement policies, as well as possibly restrictions on these land sales that are taking place both in Europe and in the United States of occupied Palestinian lands?
Well, these sales of territories, first of all, from a legal point of view, they are first of all, they are under the occupation system. So they are under duress. And when an act is made under duress, is null and void, totally. And they don't not even need to go to a court to declare it void. So the world must take a resolution and must even declare that it's null and void, because it was taken under a regime of occupation. Second, when you transfer a land between a Palestinian person who is under duress and another person, an Israeli person, it doesn't transfer the nationality of this land. It transfers only the property, but not the nationality. The trick here, and the trap here is that the Netanyahu government wants to make believe that if a land is the property of an Israeli, it becomes an Israeli territory. You can take very simply. You can take a person, a Brazilian person or whatever, who will go and buy a piece of land in the United States. This piece of land in the United States will not become Brazilian.
Yes.
So why they wanted to make believe that buying the land will change the nature of the nationality of this land. Yes. But the point is that this must be declared not only null and void, but also illegal. But they must take decisions against the settlers and the buyers of these lands, and to take sanctions, international sanctions against them, because they are expropriating people, even if if it's against a small of money, an amount of money, whatever, but it is under duress. So these people are committing an international crime, and they must be sanctioned. And countries like the European Union,
Yes.
other must take sanctions against them to free their assets and to prosecute them before court.
Court. Okay, well, unfortunately we're out of time, but thank you so much for your insights. That was Majid Boudin, an international law professor. Thank you so much again for joining us this evening. That was it for In Focus, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.